Hey guys, Dave here from Wolf in the Wild Survival. I'm back out at my little bushcraft camp, and I brought some cheaper cordage that I just picked up from Dollar Tree, because there's a bunch of stuff that I wanted to do, but with the state of everything that's going on these days, I did not want to use up all of the cordage that I had in my camp pack, which is also basically my bug out bag or my inch bag. I wanted to be very careful about using anything out of that, so I finally made it into the dollar store, the Dollar Tree, and I got some jute cord and some of this bank line and just cheap crap. And I'm glad that I did, because I arrived out to my bushcraft camp here to find that somebody had basically ripped it apart and sort of re-put it back together. They ripped apart my chair, and they completely disassembled the shelter and like the raised bed, and they tried to redo it. And well, I'm almost finished putting it together. But, you know, I mean, I take my harness with me when I come into the woods, just in case of a video opportunity. And I figured I would basically do a rundown on what I do and why. Now, unfortunately, I can honestly say whoever ripped apart my campsite, they were probably a bunch of kids, to be honest. But they did burn up all my firewood, so they're not that young. They're definitely not people who watch my channel, or they'd know how to tie a knot. And trust me, wow, what a mess they made. And they had this really cheap cordage from one of the dollar places, and it's basically a cheap knockoff of 550 paracord. Wow, they've got random knots and loops tied everywhere through it. It almost makes it unusable. And you know, paracord, once you get a good knot tied in, it's kind of hard to get it out. So I didn't really think I wanted to spend all the time messing around with that. So using the cheaper stuff. So first of all, they ripped apart the tripods and they made bipods. And then the supports here, and then they tried lashing something here and up to the front to stabilize it, and when that didn't work, they basically just they took a log and they jammed it underneath the bipod to try to remake the tripod, and that still barely held it up. When I took the two of them out and started to tear it down, the whole thing come over. Oh, and they also had a ridgepole up across the top, which I've been planning on doing, but that doesn't necessarily need to be load-bearing, and they used a big load-bearing log. So, yeah. Let me bring you in and show you more of a closer-up and give you a bit of a rundown. Okay, first of all, we have our basic tripod design. Okay, this is a freestanding structure all on its own. Same thing on the other side. This is going to allow the whole raised bed shelter structure basically to stand on its own without wobbling back and forth like crazy. Okay? Whoever, I know you're not watching my channel, but whoever it is, you can't rely on a bipod. Okay, and all of the knots that they tied, all of the cordage was all just wrapped loosely around. It wasn't wrapped and frapped properly. It wasn't, you know, anything. It was just, such a mess. So you got to get it tightened down. You got to, you know, wrench it down good, and you have to have your main supports on your two sides. They can't be bipods. Okay, they have to be tripods. Or at least like a tree. You can tie off a ridgepole to a tree and kind of work from that. But you can't just rely on a simple bipod freestanding. That's not going to work. It's not going to give you the rigidity that you need. Next, we have our raised bed supports. And this goes from one side of the tripod to the other on both sides of the shelter. This was pretty much, it was left more or less as I made it. It didn't really loosen up over time, but on one side I probably should have used a little bit more cordage than I did, but like I say before, I was trying to conserve. But they held pretty good. They didn't loosen up, they didn't mess up. They were not extremely easy to get untied so that I could redo everything either. But let me see now. Yeah, I probably should have used the other side. Okay, here there's kind of an X pattern, and then I wrap it in here. There's a reason for that. The X pattern is going to grab and hold on to that really, really good, so that when you frap it in behind, you wrap that around like that and pull it tight, that's going to grip right in and it's going to hold. Okay, now I did not notch anything in. This is not connected to this pole through any kind of like sawing a notch in place and then fitting them in and tying it in, which I normally would do for a lot of like a more permanent style structure, but I knew that eventually this thing was going to get destroyed. People were going to, you know, come along and start messing stuff up. So I didn't put as much work into it as I could have or maybe should have. But the way this is wrapped in an X pattern and then tied in, it's strong enough. It's definitely strong enough, and that's important. Whoever it was, they basically just wrapped it a couple of times and then tied a whole bunch of knots. It was loose, it was sloppy, and it was falling apart when I got here. And I mean, I was here 2 weeks ago, basically. So somebody in the last 2 weeks has been here, ripped it down, messed around, maybe hung out here. They've burnt up all the firewood and ripped apart my chair, presumably for more cordage, so that they could continue doing the mess that they did. So my way, stronger, lasts longer, and uses less cordage. The kids that were in here needed a lot more cordage. It was wobbly, it was falling apart. I undid a couple of knots and the whole thing just fell right over. Now, let me just start off by saying, I am fully aware that I do not own the land that this thing is sitting on. I do not own the wood that it is made out of. Okay? I call it my bushcraft camp because it's, you know, it's something that I'm doing, but I don't own any of it. Okay? So we're kind of on the honor system that if you come across somebody's area that they've put work into, yeah, enjoy it, hang out, use up all the firewood, you know, not that big a deal. There's firewood everywhere in here. But ripping it apart, ruining somebody's hard work, ripping it all apart and doing that, you know, that's kind of very uncool. Very, very uncool. But, you know, I'm not saying, you know, don't touch my stuff and da-da-da-da-da. The only reason why I'm even doing this video and mentioning it is it's actually a good idea. It's something where if you go into the woods and you're in a bug out situation and you need to put up some sort of a shelter, a lot of other channels, you're stuck sleeping in the dirt with, you know, some sticks and leaves over top of you, whereas my way, what I'm basically doing here, yeah, it's a lot more work, but it's way more comfortable. It gets you up off the ground. You can sleep right by the fire. You can't do that in a debris shelter, you know. And I think it would really help a few people who maybe are, you know, they're thinking back to my videos and they're, you know, how did that weird looking guy do that? I can't remember. Well, this is kind of a bit of a step-by-step. So I'm not doing the video to complain, I'm doing the video to explain. Now, as for the raised bed portion, you don't really have to tie that down. You don't. They had some of it tied down, presumably to try to add some structure to the shelter after they ripped apart the tripod design. You don't actually need to tie it down. What you need to do is kind of roll it around a little bit, figure out where does that log want to more or less sit. Where does it want to just be at rest without rolling around at all? And then you put it into place and you kind of leave it like that, and you just jam all the logs together. And then you trim off any where the branches are coming out, any of the pokies, anything that might poke into you or your air mattress or whatever. You just take your knife or your saw and you just give it a trim. Where you go, Dave's your uncle. Now, that being said, you can, if you're not filling up the whole thing, which I don't intend to, you can tie off the very last one, sort of lashing it in to stop it from sliding out at all. Might be a good idea. I haven't done that, but not a huge going concern because I haven't slept on it yet. But the Ontario government has decided that the fire ban is over as of yesterday, so I can come here and camp now. Pretty cool. Finally. Okay. What else? Okay, every log that you cut is going to have one side that's thicker than the other. And if you build your bed with all the thin parts on one side and the thick parts on the other, it's going to start fanning out. You don't want that. So you want to sort of alternate. In. And that will help to keep it somewhat uniform. Also, there's going to be areas that, you know, they're not going to slide together like bricks. So you gotta kind of remember that you're not going to get it perfect. Doesn't matter how much. Well, I mean, with enough work maybe, but that's a lot more work than I'd be willing to do. So you know, you gotta remember, you know, if you're going to sleep out in something like this, you're going to want to have something underneath you, whether it's some sort of a mat that you have woven out of plant material, or, you know, like a decent blanket or sleeping bag, or ideally an air mattress with a blanket or a sleeping bag. But you gotta make sure that it's nice and smooth if you're going to use an air mattress. You don't want to poke a hole in it. For a while now, a while ago, when I first started doing this, I had kind of intended on filling up the entire area here with logs. But then I moved it a lot closer to the fire. Now that sort of summer's starting to kind of come along, I guess I don't really need it close to the fire. Not necessarily. But I like the option. I like to have that basic design. So I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to leave it close to the fire, and I am not going to fill up the whole thing. Oh, man. There we are. So, I'm just going to tie down this last one to try to stop everything from basically rolling out. Like I say, it's not necessary, but it might help. It might be a good idea. It almost might be necessary. You never know. Now, to be honest, I'm really hoping that whoever came here and did what they did, I hope when they return and they see that I've put it back to the way it was, I hope they leave it alone. It's fine the way it is. It was not fine the way they had it. I certainly wouldn't trust sleeping in it. And I hope they come back and enjoy it and, you know, hang out and play and use a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of uncommon sense to more or less just leave it alone. Leave it the same way they found it, basically. If I had the time, I would carve something up on a log or whatever to let them know that this is, you know, Wolf in the Wild's YouTube channel, and maybe they could come and check out my channel and hear my thoughts and hear what I have to say about, you know, what they did to my little bushcraft camp, and maybe learn a little bit, because they were obviously not very experienced bushcrafters when they came to do what they did. Not at all. But I guess we'll see. Now I have to rebuild the chair. They ripped up the chair, presumably for cordage. So, which is also basically the thrown away from home. It's, you know, my toilet out here, so got to rebuild that now. So thankfully, all the pieces to the chair are they're still here. They didn't burn up the chair or do anything too bad to it. Now, normally I would do a jam knot right here. This cordage isn't strong enough for that. But that's okay, because it was cheap. So I will use a lot of it. And hopefully I won't fall through this one. Definitely would not be the first time I've fallen through something that wasn't strong enough to hold me, though. Most of it's on my channel somewhere, in some way, shape, or form. Now, I am going to do, for crying out loud, I'm going to do that X pattern that we talked about. I'm going to do a lot of it, which is why I'm not just cutting a length off of this thing. I want to make sure I have enough to really batten this thing down, because like I say, it's not that strong. Okay, I think that about there. Nice pattern of in the X. Now I'm going to get right in the groove there. Ow. I'll lock that down good and tight. Got to be careful because I'll probably break this stuff if I pull too tight. Now there is a knot down underneath here that I have to be careful of. Yeah, I got to make sure that I get up and in and around that knot. I don't want to leave a space there and not do it properly, because it'll loosen over time. And that won't be good for structural integrity of the chair. Now, just gotta knot that in good and tight. There we are. Now I just gotta do that side and then maybe smooth that bump off that I never did the last time, and it probably dug in while I was sitting on it. Alright, she's back together. Let's take it for a test sit. And yes, I'm going to use it as a chair, so I'm taking it for a test sit. Well, it's cheap cordage. It's not very strong, but it's $1.25 for, geez, I don't even remember now, a couple of 100 feet. $200 feet. It doesn't say what the brake strength is. But, oh no, this I got at Dollarama for $1.50. The jute I got at Dollar Tree for $1.25 for like 3 rolls. So yeah, Duramax Mason twine, 200 feet. You got to use a fair bit of it, but not bad. Not bad at all. For 200 feet, I mean, I pay $8 or $9 for 50 feet of paracord, which is perfect. It's great. I've got some tarred bank line, which is actually fairly expensive. I had to order it like off of Amazon. Actually, a friend of mine got it for me for my birthday, and it's actually cheaper for me to use paracord. But I mean, I have some for, you know, stuff like this on a more permanent structural type level. So all in all, $1.50 for 200 feet. Not bad. They took my cooking quad pod and they just leaned it up against a tree over here, so that's fully intact and ready to rock and roll. That's no problem. Some stuff is just not really all that good anymore, so it's firewood basically. But you should see all the downed wood all around this area. Like I cut this green, and yeah, that's it. Just for the chair, because all this is really, really big stuff that was dead standing. So the chair had to be like relatively thin. So that's green when I cut it. All the firewood is dead on the ground, and all of this stuff here was made at a dead standing. And there is a ton of it out here. Tons. So firewood, not a problem. Alright. My campsite is back to the way I left it. Maybe even improved a little bit. But it's back the way I left it. We'll see if it stays that way. Here's hoping. Here's hoping. I like coming here with my kids, pretty much, because it's easy to get to. And that's why it's being tampered with, and that's why you can hear like some of the sounds of the highway down over that way a ways, and guys with their dirt bikes ripping around and kind of whatever. But I mean, you know, for an area to come to with my kids, it's easy to get to. My almost 4-year-old son can make the trip just fine. So here's hoping. Here's hoping. Now, the projects that I wanted to do, I want to make an actual chair, something a little bit more comfortable than what I'm sitting on right now, because this technically is the toilet. It doubles as a chair just fine, but I do want to build another chair because I'm rarely ever out here alone. So yeah, we got a couple hours of sunlight. I'm gonna get to that now. So hopefully I have all the building material that I need to do this chair. Now it's got to be green wood. It's got to be weight bearing. You've all seen my buddy Greg. He weighs more than I do, and I weigh a fair bit. And I've fallen through a bunch of these. We got to do it. I'm hoping to do it with one tree. Hoping to do it all with just one tree. Good thing I remembered I wasn't wearing my steel toe boots before I let that fall, eh? Like number one. I'm going to build this one a little bit bigger than the last one, the toilet one. I've already de-limbed it. Perfect. I should be able to do this with just the one tree. Now, a little while ago I was talking about notching something in to make it fit better and be a little sturdier, a little more permanent. I've decided to show you what I mean rather than tell you with this chair that I'm building. So I've already measured the distance between the cuts that I want that basically sort of notched out. I didn't bring a chisel or anything like that, and I don't want to spend too much time, you know, really working at it, so might be a little hard to see with the amount of light that I have. The magic hour is definitely done, but I'm just going to make a series of cuts all the way down, somewhat close together. Then I'm going to take my knife. That might be too far. Might need to mess with that. Oh, there we are. Just break all of that out. Nothing super fancy. Now, where did I put my hammering stick? There. No, that's not it. Yeah, we found a piece of quartz on the way here. I don't necessarily recommend doing this with your knife, but I'm going to do it. I am being really light with it, and it's not really making a mess of the knife at all. I mean, a lot of people don't like these buck knives because they're not made in the US, and some people find them a misery. Some people get really bad ones, apparently. I like mine. I've never had any issue with mine. Okay, now I'm going to notch this as well, and that is going to sit in that notch that I made. It doesn't have to seat in like perfectly. Basically, it's just something that it just leans in so that when you tie the cordage into place, it gives a little bit of extra grab. That's really all it is. If it's load-bearing, like a chair, or something along that lines, it's probably worth doing, to be honest. Okay. Did not go down far enough with that. There's a knot in the way too. So I've got to come this way about that much more. Now, I knew this knot was here, and I knew this was going to be a problem. On this side there is no knot, so I'm going to customize that on the other side as needed. But I'm going to make sure that this can fit into place before I start working on the other side. It's that whole measure twice and cut once idea. Speaking of thinking ahead, before you start cutting wood, you should probably pull your pants over your boots so that sawdust can't get in. There we go. There we are. For those of you not completely paying attention to what I'm doing here, before I turn my knife this way, I move my hand way back out of the way. The odds of an accident vary with how well you pay attention to detail to stuff like that. So, okay. So the two notches basically fit in together, and it just gives it a little seat kind of thing, just a little extra grab to give it a little more structural integrity. So I've got the tripod up, I got the front on, notched in. This pole right here, I've notched and tied on. This pole, I just have sitting on the pole that's notched in, so I didn't need to cut a notch into that. Then I just wrapped a whole bunch of bank line all over the place. And I'm just gonna do that. There. And that's all one tree. I got the vast majority of the chair done with one tree. Not bad. Bring you around front of the chair and show you exactly what's going on. So I got these two poles here, tied to the back, sitting on the front. Now I will lash those in as well. I'll lash those into place in a minute. They are sticking out about as much as my hand. A little bit more. And where did I, there it is. I'm almost out of this roll, but I should have enough to just lash that on real quick. And it doesn't have to be anything super spectacular or anything. It's basically just to stop it from moving around. Oh yeah. That extra hand and a half worth of room was definitely worth it. Definitely worth it. Oh yeah, that's comfy. Got this thing here, but nah, what are you gonna do, right? I'm not gonna do it today. But next time I'm here, whether I film it or not, I don't know, but I'm gonna carve some notches down the sides here. And then I'm going to weave some jute twine into the back to make a backrest. And that'll definitely up the comfort factor. I should have made it a little bit bigger so that the steeple was above my head. And I was kind of sort of thinking that, like when I originally decided to make it bigger, I just didn't really measure properly, I guess. So... And like I say, I wanted to build this out of one tree. So I will weave in some jute cord to up the comfort factor on the back and call that a finished product. I wanted to do a little bit more today, but finding my bushcraft camp in the state that it was in necessitated me repairing it instead of taking on new projects. I really wanted to build a gear rack. Really wanted to build a gear rack. And maybe a little table. Something to put my coffee on, put my stuff on as I'm, unpacking my gear using saws and knives and my water and whatnot. I would have, just somewhere to put it other than right back into the pack or the webbing or whatever. But we got about a half an hour left of daylight, and it's going to take us longer than that to walk out of here. So time's a wasting, we gotta get going. Thanks for watching my video. I hope nobody thought that I was laying claim to anything. I don't mind people coming out here and, you know, playing in the camp. Just don't ruin somebody else's hard work, guys. Use a little bit of that uncommon sense, and we'll all get along a lot better. Good stuff. You guys have a good one.